Right now, we're going to be finishing, I can't believe it's not Magic, the Technocratic Union, Mage lore by TheBurgerkrieg. We got through a few different factions, the World Order, Iteration X, the Requisitions, and all the crazy stuff they can do, and we're not going to talk about the management section. Yeah. So let's see where this goes. And my go is it's probably going to go insane, and I'm here for this. Ooh, also, Matt Calamity mentioned meatball stew with shrimp, beef, vegetables, pasta, and chicken. Oh, wow. That wasn't so much my stomach rumbling as deciding to challenge my esophagus to a fight and dragging it open to say, hey, eat. And oh, yeah, I feel it rumbling. Oh, God, that is getting me. So let's see where we go on this one.
The progenitors are in.
Also, literally as I started, sorry I mentioned, an orc got trapped in a church and came as an orc equivalent of the Emperor for mankind made of prime orcs. Oh my God, sorry, that's awesome.
Mentioned Q Division, which makes all the gadgets. The progenitors are in the business of.
Okay, am I the one looking at this and going, it looks like a butt? Maybe that's just me.
Reality deviants. And what I mean by that is that what they do is they actually perform reality deviants within the Technocracy, which is an organization dedicated to the stamping out of reality deviants.
What?
They are mad scientists, crazy researchers, on the very cutting edges, looking...
Oh, so they're not so much reality deviants as the traditions. They're reality deviants of, hey, let's follow our aesthetic as far as it goes. We were at the point where we should stop. Let's go fast and see what happens.
Just how far hypertech can
cool.
be stretched. And sometimes some of the things that they do actually become part of consensus. Their main expertise in all this is and always has been medical science. Victor Frankenstein is the classic archetypal progenitor, and that is not just in the sense that he was a mad scientist, but also that he literally created new life. And that's something that progenitors spend a whole lot of time and energy on. They're not trying to necessarily upgrade humanity through cybernetics like Iteration X is, but to make it anew entirely. Which isn't to say they don't use cybernetics at all, also. It's just that that's not the thing they mainly prefer to do. And much like Victor Frankenstein, they have unleashed a whole slew of horrors onto the world.
I really hope he goes through a list of them because I want to see just how many crazy monster ideas you can get just to blame on them.
With all their failed projects.
Which one of them is pigeons?
They used to not care about any form of ethics in any way, shape, or form.
The others did?
Just destroying human life and limb as they saw fit just to see what they could come up with. And it causes a lot of damage to people and society. Forget like eugenics and phrenology, although that certainly is stuff that they came up with. I'm talking zombie outbreaks. Fake human creatures that are performing slave labor in deep space. Man-made horrors beyond your comprehension. And
they're basically describing they did Warhammer 40k before Warhammer 40k. And depending on when this part of the lore came up for Warhammer, this might actually be there because I think this is one of the older franchises that might be able to compete. Also, Hobbit 1, thank you too. What Siren is referring to is a series done by Channel No Man on Embra, his Primorcs, and Horus Heresy. Very well done. One of the best orc voices I've heard. He is great. Check him out. Oh, that might be interesting. Have to add to the list of options later.
In spite of their allegedly very good security, a lot of progenitor creations have managed to escape their labs.
Why do I have a feeling it's escaped in question or quotation marks?
Causing irreparable damage to consensus that had the NWO hyperventilating for decades. This is until one day, perhaps due to the dimensional anomaly, the progenitor's internal money people went, nuh-uh, and majorly reshuffled the whole organization to focus away from the science and genetic engineering of let's just see what's going to happen, and more onto preparing humanity for the real crises that are coming. And also ideally working with...
See, that's actually something I'm kind of curious about. What are they talking about the real crises that are coming? Because it seems like everyone else is kind of reactionary, but these guys, despite being the bad guys who may or may not also be destroying the planet or killing a god, are also the only ones actively going out of their way to defend the planet. I mean, I know some other factions do that in their own way, but they're the ones who are humans doing it. I'm not actually sure if the traditions actively do that or they just defend against things they know are there in the dark. It's probably that way as well. But what would they consider the things in the dark? I don't... Oh, and Siren, you mentioned World of Darkness was 1991, Warhammer was 1983. Yeah, they probably got beat by Warhammer then. Hard to believe it's 83, though. Wow.
Other conventions to stop these crises from coming up altogether. I'm talking climate change here, by the way. That's one of the main ones that they have directed their efforts at combating. None of the other conventions have changed so drastically and so quickly. Well, I mean, maybe except for the Void Engineers, but that really depends on the timeline, I guess. And many of the old school
hopefully Void Engineers are
those
next.
who hope to become like them are not very happy about this. The whole convention is structured a lot more like research universities than anything else. It's rather non-authoritarian. People are encouraged to be individuals. They're actually deeply into...
How is that anything like a research university? They're massively authoritarian. It's literally like, hey, have you written at least 3 books in the last 5 minutes? Don't worry, you can do anything you want, as long as anything you want literally makes us money. Or fame. Take your pick. Oh, he means authoritarian in control of what you're looking at, not how you're looking at it. Okay, that makes more sense.
Woven with the global scientific and academic elite, which gives them ample opportunity to detect anyone who might be on the verge of awakening to the secrets of enlightened science. And to suss out whether university hierarchy is structured like the progenitors or whether the progenitors hierarchy is structured like that of a university, is sort of a chicken and egg type situation.
Same time divergence.
Which a lot of progenitors could actually tell you which was first. It was the 3D printer. And the only reason these changes could be implemented at all within the convention is because the progenitors actually make a ton of money for the technocracy. They hold a lot of...
Okay, this is actually surprising. I didn't realize they would actually engage with money. I was kind of... Because they reality norm, they're literally probably the guys who invented the concept of money. Or they found people who had concepts of money and made that the normal. Yeah, that actually makes sense now I think about it. Also, sorry, you mentioned we reached 15 donations, so I think you should react to a couple episodes to Emperor because each episode is 39 minutes long. Oh, I might actually do that.
Medical and other technological patents, and while they are of course not entirely self-funded given how expensive much of their research is,
but wouldn't they just have control to get the money already?
Actually comes internally through research grants,
which is probably why they get to do grants
to refocus the efforts of the entire convention was to not give the money to psychopaths. Although
they're based on a grant system. You know what? This is where I would normally say something along the lines of, oh, dear God. Why? Because the grant system is a giant pile of begging and begging and begging and getting ignored, and someone gives you $5, like, oh my God, this is more money than I've had all week. I can buy a water bottle. Oh, they're $10 now? Yeah, no. But again, having seen the management section of this video, that level of bureaucratic, why are they doing this, kind of makes sense. And I hate thinking about that section of the video. Oh, dear God. And Sarian, if you don't agree to my terms, I will donate $5. You wouldn't, Sarian. You wouldn't. Oh, God. Oh, God, no.
Though where those money people got their conscience from is a kind of a mystery, really.
That
doesn't mean they don't still have a ton of interesting projects going on. They have an underwater research station manned almost exclusively by dolphins and octopuses.
Dolphins?
So then I suppose it would be dolphined and octopused. They're involved...
They octopussied it. They actually had an underwater base of octopus. Oh God, that's literally an octopus garden under the sea. If the in-universe reasoning for the Beatles is they were technocracy plants, I'm going to laugh my ass off so hard. Oh, God.
Involved in various de-extinction efforts, including fucking dinosaurs, various interpretations of them. Neanderthals, too. They made Neanderthals. Apparently very nice, very kind people. They are battling death itself, which I, of course, think is very cool. Oh, and did I mention they're building the actual, literal Avengers? Yeah, the progenitors are trying to make superheroes.
They're trying to make superheroes. They're trying to make superheroes in the same way that the boys made superheroes, aren't they? And we just hit the 20 super chat goal to trigger me having to read 50 Shades of Grey live. I'm glad I'm leaving that in the VOD alone and never actually uploading it to YouTube.
Like, that's how they think they're gonna solve a lot of problems, by introducing superheroes to the world. But these days, their efforts truly are focused on making more people more healthy by developing novel medical treatments. Or rather, introducing those treatments and medicines into the consensus, because most of the actual work of creating them has already happened.
Oh,
now it's about
that's how they would do
it.
Getting people to believe it can work, so it can work.
Difficult in the field, given that there's a lot of distrust of big pharma around the world, not to mention consensus fracturing in general. So they've had to become a little tricky in their approaches to certain...
Wait, are these guys literally the goop salesmen? Oh god, they're probably the testicle tanner people at the same... It's all the crazy pseudoscience that's actually real science, but also not real because no one believes it yet. Oh my god.
Certain communities. One thing they do now is they pretend to be New Age medicine. You know all the stories where the parents chose not to pursue cancer treatment for their child, but through prayers and faith, the child healed anyway? Yeah, unless a chorister was involved, it was not prayer that did it. It was a snake oil salesman that gave them some kind of magical thing that they would rub on their child's forehead, and that snake oil then contained Progenitor-developed nanomachines that went into the child's body and killed the cancer. Now, this does create a little bit of a conundrum that sort of illustrates the divides within the technocracy.
Because they're using super science to change consensus so super science can be accepted, except by doing it that way, they're feeding the traditions because it looks like magic. Okay, that's awesome.
Pretty well. Because not only is that, like, clear reality deviance that violates consensus and invites paradox, it also, because it happened, like, sneakily, reinforces the idea that faith healing can work in people's minds. I mean, they literally saw it happen, and that's bad for the type of rationalistic consensus the Technocratic Union is trying to build. On the other hand,
it shows it can happen.
What, are you gonna let the kid die? It is the mission.
Wait, are they actually doing the right thing for the right reasons, even though they're so bad at it that occasionally they have no morals? Oh, not what I was expecting.
Of the technocracy to protect humanity from the predation
because
of
it's the new version.
What could more strongly embody that mission than saving the life of a child from the predations of its parents' superstitious beliefs?
I'm just going to take a wild guess here and say there's a butt coming.
The major project dedicated to reconciling that divide is probably that the nanites that were given to the child may have included certain agents that also restructured its brain and made it believe in technocratic consensus. This is usually
literally mind control
with NWO efforts, because developing those kinds of nanites is much more resource intensive, and they specialize in the kind of social manipulation to make that happen anyway. But the progenitors are in fact trying to science pill people. Some common foci that are very popular with progenitors is the development and testing of novel scientific...
So they're literally giving pseudoscience, which is actual science, to make people believe, physically change them to believe in real science, while showing them that fake magic science works. So for every one person they fix, 100, probably 100,000 more on the internet suddenly believe in the traditions. Honestly, it seems like they're going to fail horribly, and I love it.
Theories. Now you might say, Burger, isn't what the progenitors do as scientists also will working, because that is how the science works even for progenitor technocrats, and isn't that kind of an inherent violation that exists in contradiction to the very way of how science works and how science is done? So can these people really call themselves scientists if they know that the research that they do...
The answer is probably stop talking
the way
and just
science
believe it.
does. And the answer to that is no. You just don't understand enlightened science. They also have,
and if you do, you don't believe it.
Laboratories full of expensive gear and staff that works tirelessly. The whole vast field of experimentation, whether that be sort of surgery, CRISPR grafting, or chemical synthesis.
I'm getting it would be like the SCP trying out something that's Keter class. They know it's going to blow up, and they're kind of curious what will happen.
Anything you can picture people doing in a lab could potentially be a focus. Much like the belief that just having enough funding can get the job done. Controversially, a lot of especially progenitors believe in discredited pseudoscientific theories to work their enlightened science. Those
How would that normally work out if it's discredited, but also at the same time completely accurate, because consensus would say something doesn't work? But is there a consensus that changed? Or was it a change that they had no control over, because apparently that happens? What happens when they're discrediting themselves? Huh. I don't actually know, and I'm kind of curious.
Are part of their personal paradigm, especially older and more influential ones. So in spite of the convention's frequent attempts to bring these people into the present, there is something deeply idiosyncratic of how magic and enlightened science work, and many of these people are used to working under conditions that do adhere to their personal worldview far away from the front lines. And they have name recognition, achievements, contacts that go back a long time within the progenitors. Keeping them in check is a project in its own right. Some projector methodologies include the applied sciences, an extremely varied group of individuals who share experience and resources with each other to field test various progenitor projects.
Sounds normal. What's the twist?
The facade engineers who can actually trace their roots back all the way to the Kosian society in ancient Egypt, and who work on developing new forms of humanity based on the human blueprint. The E in facade, by the way, stands for eugenics. It is, in fact, an acronym. And the pharmacopeists, who trace their roots back to different parts of the Kosian circle, who used to be the more rationally minded herbalists and alchemists, but are now modern-day pharmacists. And
it's literally pharmacist based on something previously that was all about... Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. Are they literally big pharma at this point? Or are they just feeding the options to big pharma? I don't know. I'm not sure which one would be more horrible.
Apothecaries. Which, you know, if you do go to
Apothecary, my good sir.
There is a certain degree of magic about those places.
Yeah.
I have always found it fascinating. You go in there, you give them a slip of paper, and they come back with some substance that will heal you. It will change the way your body works.
Sugar pills.
And I don't know what goes on in the back there, but I would really love to see it. The Syndicate make
Okay. Wow. I mean, he's been committing to the bit of dressing in character for every one of the divisions of the Technocracy, but I don't even need to know a word about them to be a little surprised these are not the money guys, considering most of the funding for the Technocracy apparently comes through the previous group. But these guys look like, if this is not a reference to Vegas in some way in the Mafia, I am going to be very disappointed. Or it's a bunch of swingers. They can go either way on this one. Why do you have this jacket, sir?
Money. No, seriously, they make it. That's what they do. Huh. They make
they actually make the money.
They're not just big business. They are the bigger fish in the pool that big business only ever gets to see the vague outline of. So yeah, the Technocratic Union requires an unfathomable amount of funding to do what it does.
So they make it themselves?
It's the Syndicate's job to bring in that cash
they're
supply.
earning it.
They manage the Union's assets and...
So they're probably the ones selling the products and doing everything revenue-wise for the previous group who gets them. Okay.
And fund its projects, which you may think gives them a huge amount of power. And that is entirely correct. It's very true. They are extremely powerful. While they don't exactly dominate the other conventions, especially if the dimensional anomaly occurred, they will be the most powerful among them. This is because they are much more earthbound than the other conventions. They had very few horizon constructs in the first place, and even kept a lot of management directly on Earth. The Syndicate...
so unlike everyone else, they would be the most powerful because they're still earthbound. And everyone who was able to break reality would be broken by reality wasn't there. So the people who could somehow found a way to still not break it. I realized every single word I just said is absolute and utter hogwash unless you have seen every other part of this to realize how crazy the entire Mage situation is. Huh. The fact that it makes sense to me still, even after I said it, is in its own right kind of weird.
Thrives in human society. They have obscene, unspeakable amounts of wealth. They don't need space stations. They have everything they could possibly ever want right here. So when the dimensional anomaly destroyed most of the technocracy's space infrastructure, they are the convention that lost the least. If rebuilding efforts are underway, they are currently dishing out copious amounts of Skrilla, which would push them to capacity in their ability to generate cash flow, but also put them in an extremely powerful position at a point where the technocracy is at its weakest.
So literally they're America after World War II, where everyone went to us. Yeah, America, US, us. Sorry, funny pun. It's not even intentional. I just love it. Because we had the most money after everyone else got literally bombed out of having anything. So finances help there. And they're literally the ones benefiting from their own side. Yeah, that actually kind of tracks.
Holding the purse strings in moments of transformation gives you the ability to set up a lot of systemic factors that are going to play in your favor way into the future. So many among the conventions feel like the Syndicate is, especially right now, too powerful.
Probably.
Especially for a group that so often conflicts with the ideals of the technocracy.
How
you
so?
see all the hierarchy problems in the technology that I mentioned earlier, where...
Oh yeah, he's mentioning how the people at the top and the other factions are completely out of touch because they're in their own little bubbles. Literal bubbles of reality where what they want is what they exist in, and they can't go back to normal Earth because it would paradox them. So they give orders to people who are under them, telling them what they want to hear because they can only really acknowledge what they want to hear. So lying to the boss becomes the normal, so it promotes the dumbest, most assholish people who will abuse the system to get there. So anyone actually competent gets beaten down because they might bring the entire House of Cards down. Yeah, that completely unrealistic and unprecedented dystopian reality that no one in real life would ever engage with. Yeah, that one. I remember when he talked about that. I wish I didn't.
Being a blood-sucking psychopath is the easiest way to the top. Nowhere is this worse than within the Syndicate. Seriously, especially for unenlightened personnel, for sleepers, and a lot of extraordinary citizens, being in the Syndicate, it's an extremely toxic culture. Going so far that the Mage Splat books say explicitly that the technocracy has like zero tolerance for sexual harassment, except for the Syndicate. The Syndicate can have a little bit of sexual harassment as a treat. After all, what is the point of being powerful if you're not going to be using that power for your own personal enjoyment? Yeah, that kind of like slimy ass bullshit is the whole MO of the Syndicate. And they get it.
I'm just assuming every bookie who has grease-backed hair, not regular hair, not slightly well-kept hair, not even someone who is actually like the family friend who knows what they're doing, but they give you good odds because they're not really betting more than a few pennies. But like, I'm talking to the guys like, so you got 10,000 on Jerry Dove, who's his name? Paul Hegg, random guy. Yeah, the guy with the limp, the one who got his leg amputated. You want to bet everything on him, right? He's going to win the Super Bowl, right? Oh, I have good odds on him. You definitely want to make that bet. Yeah. I'm assuming it's that level of sleazy is probably exactly what we're getting here, right? You know, I'm just making a joke, but I'm probably right, and that kind of disturbs me a little bit.
Away with it because they control the money and their entire ethos is to make as much money as possible no matter the cost. To that end, not only are they big in all of the legitimate corporate conglomerates of the world, they also control organized crime, global cartels. Yeah, that spaceship you're flying in, El Chapo paid for it.
I mean, can you imagine if companies engaged in illegal behavior to make money? I'm not saying Aquafina or the Nestle brand would do anything to literally kill off people in Africa who were near springs they wanted to use for bottled water, or that Coca-Cola literally paid death squads and got away with it in court because they argued this didn't happen in America, so you have no jurisdiction over the fact that we literally hired death squads. This is so unrealistic. What a zany fantasy world of darkness is. Oh, yeah, I love how unrelatable and crazy this completely impossible stuff is.
They are also one of the Union's most gaping security holes, especially through the famous Special Projects Division, which worked with the conglomerate Pentex of Werewolf the Apocalypse fame, very evil corporation, before the Special Projects Division was dissolved. And yet, somehow, even though the Special Projects Division no longer exists,
it still exists.
Unfathomable amounts of money are being sent to the technocracy for things that it does. And, like, not even management knows what's going on, but hey, it's free cash. It's for this kind of shit that NWO forensic auditors love to give the Syndicate a little slap on the fingers when the higher-ups deem it necessary.
And they probably don't often.
When they can get away with it. And in a sort of ironic twist, the Syndicate is the only convention of the technocracy that has actively gotten worse over the past few decades.
Oh.
It used to be home to various economic theories and models and ideas of how business should be run. But with the rise of dog-eat-dog neoliberal capitalism, the logic of it is morally righteous when it generates a lot of profit has brought the Syndicate's worst qualities to the fore. They seriously dropped the ball in Russia and a lot of other post-Soviet states with the whole communism-capitalism conflict, just completely folding the cards on the communist members of the Syndicate for the sake of personal power play and internal politicking, and then ruining the Russian economy with shock therapy introduction of neoliberal capitalism. That's a historical fact, by the way. All the poverty that you see in Russia, that only happened after the Soviet Union was dismantled.
I mean, there was a lot of poverty prior to that, but a lot of people just thought it was normal, so it also was just kind of, well, the normal, because for them it wasn't poverty, it was the baseline. It just looked like poverty by comparison. What came later made that comparison look generous, though.
And had all of its stuff being sold off to extremely rich people. Before the fall of the Soviet...
Also, what he's not adding right there is a lot of the stuff he's being talked about being sold for rich people included a lot of things that were nuclear. There was a lot of radioactive content, such as there were lighthouses that had nuclear fuel generating the power to keep the lighthouse running, that somehow the fuel kind of ran out. And by ran out, I mean someone took it and ran out. Don't know where it's at. That's been a problem for decades now. It's scary when you think about it. Please don't think about it too much.
Union, Russians were eating the best out of all of the people in the world. And the people who got all those state assets through their political connections are known as the oligarchs today. However, even within the Syndicate, a lot of individuals, especially of the more theory-inclined side of understanding how the magic of money works, have been calling for a little bit of a restructuring. And it all ultimately comes down to the idea of consensus viability.
Huh. So theoretically, if they got enough people to believe in trickle-down economics, it'd actually work for once. But the reason consensus doesn't reflect it is because the people instituting it the most would be the Syndicate. And the Syndicate don't actually believe in this. They're not promoting actually making it work. They're promoting making themselves richer by getting all the money. Does that mean that they are theoretically defeating themselves? Because they are changing consensus to it doesn't work because it gives the people at the top all the money, but it only does that because they're the ones who make sure that the people at the top, who are them, get all the money and no one else does. Are they succeeding so hard that they're failing? Oh, that actually would be kind of fascinating if that was the take.
Contribute to the consensus in roughly equal amounts. They believe things, and then those things are real, and the technocracy's approach has been to obviously make it so the consensus they want people to believe in is one that is appealing to those people. To put it in economic terms, regular people need to see a good return on investment into the consensus. Otherwise, they'll just choose a different reality to invest in, which is something that's happening with a lot of disgruntled people these days. Thus, the fact of the socialist ownership of the consensus turns out to be one of those irrefutable realities that the Syndicate must adapt to. At least such is the theory. The people who are proposing it are very much in the minority. Because, of course, the Syndicate continues to recruit primarily people who are ruthless and devoid of compassion. They value self-motivation, ingenuity, the grind set. One of the things they're also very traditionally liberal in is the fact that they have no hard new life, old life divide, because usually when you ascend into the Syndicate...
So basically, the one time where you should have the old life, new life divide is the most ineffective here because they want you for your old life. Do they have the most unmaged members or the least unmaged members? Sorry, awakened, whatever. Because at this point, it almost sounds like they're shaping reality just by getting the most ruthless people. I can't speak today. And getting other people to believe them because they want it.
Retaining your old business contacts is very fucking useful. You don't want to enter the business org and immediately lose all your assets. That would be a huge waste. The idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is deeply ingrained into the notions of how they view magic.
Oh god, I hate that phrase. This is just me going on a little English major rant. The entire notion of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps was not meant as a, this is a good thing. It was meant as an insult because it's functionally impossible because you're literally pulling yourself up. So by doing so, you would knock yourself over and fall on your ass. It is meant as a joke for anyone dumb enough to believe that. That's exactly how it is taken. The problem is most people just heard, wow, that sounds like a really motivational sign. And they ignore the fact that if you pull your bootstraps up, you're literally knocking yourself over to... wow, that sounds like this guy's a real go-getter. It's like saying, go fuck yourself. And you're like, wow, thanks, dude. I would love to do that. It's like, no, that's not what I meant. Stop, no. Oh, God, why are you doing that? Stop doing it. It's that level of what are you saying versus how people take it that just somehow manifests in the weirdest way possible. This is an old thing. It was meant in the previous century when it was said that way, and has since moved into natural consensus that saying pulling yourself up by the bootstraps is to show that you're strong. And everyone has kind of just worked with it so long that that's how you go. It's just how language changes. So the intention is not what you get anymore. Yeah. English major stuff.
Syndicate technocrats often master the prime sphere, which they understand as being called primal utility. And to them, the most perfect representation of primal utility is money. Because much like primal utility, money is essentially an unseen, invisible, abstract force that can sometimes manifest in, like, bills of cash, but usually...
Oh dear God, this is literally Seto Kaiba. Screw the rules, I have money. If you were willing to play as a technocratic guy from the Syndicate, you could literally play Seto Kaiba. I don't know if that is the best or worst thing I can imagine, but I'm kind of leaning towards amazing.
Usually just sort of exists out in the ether and can make pretty much anything happen. God. Like, seriously, money is the greatest reality-shaping power in existence. Which, come to speak of it, like a wad of cash is a great quintessence storage type deal.
Oh my God. They could literally just say, here's the super science. How did you get this? How do you avoid consensus? I told people I paid $10 billion for it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see why this is a thing.
For technocrats of this particular orientation. They are the ones working on making the entire world cashless, which I, as a cash kind of guy, really fucking hate. But it makes money more abstract and thus more like Prime. Really, the whole convention is the most mystical of all of the ones within the Technocratic Union. They even have this ironic understanding of themselves as being people who do magic. They call themselves the Magic Men. In terms of foci of how they channel their magic, of course,
it's a
the
wad
most
of 20s.
common is the famous art of desire, which is something you may have heard of. Visualizing things in order to make them happen. Not very technological, as you can see. They also use marketing, arcane models of hypereconomics, power dynamics, weird, terrible fucking psychological manipulation. Seriously, these people love gaslighting. Crypto is something that they sometimes use as a focus that they try to introduce to the consensus, but people rejected it, so they failed to introduce it. The concept of like...
Fail to introduce it. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Like the team having a bunch of
only a year
eggheads
ago
that will just figure it out when you tell them to do it. That's a very common focus to manifest the magic of a syndicalist. They make the impossible happen not because they have the ability to, but
they have
because
the money to do it.
Mage believes that they can.
And that is probably the most fantasy thing we're going to ever hear. The belief that if you throw enough money at something, it'll actually get fixed.
Of course, just having influence matters, knowing the right people, being able to make a phone call that'll break reality. Sometimes they will do outright mystical rituals, usually involving like the domination and exploitation of people. Sense of style and panache, similar to what the NWO does, just with more body hair. Cocaine and
Honestly, I was expecting him to say more hair gel, but let's go with that.
every other kind of upper, which gives them a lot of similarity to the mystical tradition of the Sahajia. Probably some of them do nofap. Every insane idea can be a focus. If you ever do find technology in their magic, it's gonna be stuff like ATMs. Never any of those weird sort of hypertech devices, because who needs that kind of shit when you have money? Some of the classic Syndicate methodologies include the Enforcers, also known as the Hollow Men, who reconcile the fact that ultimately all of the value that money has is entirely imaginary by making sure that there are very real consequences to people who do not pay their bills. The financiers, or as Alex...
Oh god, they're literally a space AT&T. Yeah.
Jones would call them the globalists because they are the worldwide network of all the big banks and big business interlinking all of these various organizations to create a truly globalized economy. And media control, which has a lot of jurisdiction friction with the NWO much of the time, and though it is also its job to reinforce technocratic global consensus,
but
very often what it primarily does is reinforce syndicate consensus. The Void Engine...
Ooh, these are the guys I was really looking forward to. And he put on a wetsuit this time around. Yeah, that makes sense. I honestly fully expect to find out in the comments when this video goes live that there's a bunch of people like, yeah, we had a Technocracy game where it was literally us versus the Syndicate. We didn't realize it was us versus them at first because I thought it was us versus us, but then it was actually us versus us, but it wasn't us versus us. And it'll probably make about as much sense to comment as everything I just said. And I'm looking forward to this because that sounds fun to hear the entire story behind that.
Engineers stare into the abyss, and the abyss does its thing to them. It really depends on what abyss it specifically is.
Multiple
abysses, they do different things, the various kinds of abysses. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's metaphorical. Point is, they have seen things you people wouldn't believe. Let's face it,
or couldn't.
This is the most interesting of the conventions. Like, yeah, okay, the others are all cool and interesting, but these guys go to space. To the space of the space area. They're the space force of the Technocratic Union. Okay, maybe that's not strictly speaking all that they do, but space is in practical terms where they are located most heavily because of it's pretty big. The space is big. And they don't...
You can even say it has a lot of space. Unfortunately, you can't do the dramatic glasses ripoff when you have headphones on covering them in. Yeah, who would have thought about that?
Don't just explore conventional space as we think of it, as seen in the popular television show Carl Sagan's Cosmos, but the magical realms of wild spirits that is the Middle Umbra, also known as biospheric space. The abstract realm of the High Umbra, filled with lofty concepts and intellectual ideals, also known as ensemble space. Entropic space, the underworld, full of the dead, which once again I will refer you to my Wraith video if you want to learn more about that. A digital web, a newly emerging
cyberspace
sort of space that is somehow similar. It draws parallels to biospheric space, but it's also different, and the very concept of space doesn't make as much sense in it. But then you see all the parallels of internet cables being interconnected with each other, and the mushrooms, the global mycelial network sending information like neurons, or whatever energies bind the infinite realms of the Mid-Lumbra together.
Pretty sure it's money. At this point, I might even believe it for the Syndicate stuff.
Space or ether space, which is kind of like an alternate dimension of regular space, and it's full of magic. Here the various planets of our solar system map to the shard realms, which each represent one of the spheres of magic. The deep universe beyond the asteroid belt, where things get really weird really quickly.
Wait, only beyond the asteroid belt, not before it. Oh. Is that for every planet, or is it just Earth-centric? This is something I'm actually really curious about, because in a lot of fantasy settings, it remains Earth-centric, so this one seems more heliocentric as opposed to Earth-centric, which might be a consensus thing. But do they have alternate consensuses with aliens, or are aliens explicitly Earth-based in some way because Mage is weird? Honestly, the answer could probably be both, depending on how you want to run it.
And the farther out you go, the more weird they get. Alternate timelines, one of the particularly messy exploration endeavors. Some are mapping the deep oceans of Earth, and there is some truly scary shit in there. The same is true about the last remaining true wildernesses on this planet. Think of the Amazon, the Antarctic, the deep Siberian taiga. Things are different there. Reality is just sort of absent.
Because there's not enough people for a consensus. Oh.
And they explore these places not just to see what's there for the
but
sake
to
of
actually
curiosity,
impose reality in
but
the
to
first place.
Understand them and become better able to protect humanity from them. That is the true purpose of the Void Engineers, to protect the borders of consensus and make sure nothing weird crosses over. Which ultimately tends to come down to just making sure that nothing crosses over them at all. For any reason. So while we do think of them as more space-based, actually a lot of Void Engineer jobs are based on Earth. And whether they constitute the majority or perhaps even the entirety of the convention really heavily depends on how you play the dimensional anomaly in your...
Oh, so even though it's mostly going to be the Syndicate that's the big one if you have anomaly, but these guys could be bigger because of all the anomaly bullshit, or smaller because of all the anomaly bullshit. Or if you want to play that they were mostly on Earth to start with, so they could have a larger impact.
Chronicle. Because for obvious reasons, it is the convention most affected by it. If it's a severe, ongoing dimensional anomaly, they're going to be very strict, tightly organized, a highly military organization, focusing on Earth mostly, perhaps trying to re-establish contact with extra-dimensional assets. If the dimensional anomaly didn't happen, they will be much more utopian, going out there, trying to find the new, the incredible wonders of the universe.
So basically, we're seeing the difference between Star Trek and the reboot of Star Trek, which is more, hey, we have problems, we need to fight them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Supporting the vast space-based infrastructure that all the conventions utilize. The default is kind of in the middle, where they're still reeling from heavy losses and trying to sort of restructure and refocus themselves as a more pragmatic, a little less idealistic organization. They're kind of like...
It is kind of crazy, though, that they're the idealistic group. Just because I wasn't expecting that to be the word used for anything in the technocracy, considering how generally authoritarian and we're doing it our way and it's the right way. But also kind of because the other way was horrible, so we kind of needed to do it. But also we're doing it in the worst, most assholish way possible. We kind of want to undo some of the assholish ways of the past. I like the technocracy, man. Except for the Syndicate. I kind of like to hate those guys.
Starfleet and Star Trek, where they have like a military structure, but fundamentally understand themselves to be more of a civilian organization, where hierarchy is not necessarily a religion, but a matter of being, you know, practical. They'd probably
except for the
be in
places of Starfleet where it was religion.
Rebuilding as much as possible of what was lost during the dimensional anomaly, and also looking at how the dimensional anomaly changed the various other dimensions. They are perhaps the most alienated, haha pun intended, of the conventions, what with the nature of their mission usually taking place far away from the front lines. Many of them deal with aliens, be they like umbral spirits or actual aliens, more often than they do with regular.
Okay, so it's not just spirits that people call aliens, but are actually spirits. There's actual legitimate, this ain't from Earth type things. Okay. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and frankly, the only reason I don't understand is because everyone that talks about it does it at such length that I'm just going, yeah, goldfish attention span makes really large discussions that I have no concept of, hard to understand. Who would have thought?
The people that they are out there trying to protect. Many Void engineers actually kind of see Earth as a lost cause and are considering just leaving, just fucking off, whether the rest of humanity follows along or not. They see consensus more like a cyst around this very particular place in the universe, and what it does is it protects the narrow minds of regular people, and sometimes, depending on who you fucking ask, the narrow minds of technocratic leadership. But it needs to be cut open.
Is it even just the technocratic leadership, or in many ways it sounds like the narrow minds of the Syndicate? It almost seems like explicitly they're trying to get better, except for these guys who have all the money so they can get worse. Also, I'm not sure if you can hear that, but my cat is right at the door trying to meow to get in. Oh. I want to pet the kitty.
It needs to, the pus needs to like drain out of it so it can heal. They tend to recruit, obviously, from astronauts, which pretty much everyone who has ever been to space, the people you see on the news, all the famous astronauts, they're all extraordinary citizens of the Void Engineers. But that does make for a rather narrow pool. There's not actually all that many astronauts out there, so they also look for all kinds of military types, especially Navy and Air Force people.
Oh, because test pilots would do a lot of that.
Actually the first line of defense against all types of alien incursions, and they are quite formidable. Scientists, they're like those with an obvious focus on, like, you know, astrophysicists, biologists, geographers, but really all kinds. Engineers, also very obviously, it's
very heavily trained people who know science
type of person in
to think the right way.
Most commonly found among artists who were just sort of born into the wrong era, because there's really not that much left to explore within the bounds of generally agreed upon consensus. But these people are just born explorers. They need to go out there to explore.
Oh. So literally you could do a First Contact game with the Void Engineers of people who are wanting to do Star Trek without doing Star Trek and World of Darkness. That is so cool.
In order to be happy. In the face of the hard collectivism of Iteration X and the NWO, and the decadent individualism of the Syndicate and the Progenitors, the Void Engineers seek to walk a middle path where you need to adhere to certain strictures that are there for a good reason, but are otherwise encouraged to be yourself. With the grand exception that almost nobody can still be in touch with their old life. Something pretty much unique to the Void Engineers is that extraordinary citizens who are not enlightened mages can rise to pretty much any rank and position. In other conventions, this does not, like, very rarely one will...
So this is one where a mage wouldn't take precedence immediately. Oh. How often does that happen, though?
Get up to middle management. Enlightenment or no, if you're a Void Engineer and you have seen what a Void Engineer has seen, you are part of the blessed and cursed few. They are considered the most extraordinary of the extraordinary citizens because they have witnessed the kinds of things that enlightened members of other conventions cannot even imagine. Which leads me...
So it's literally what someone in the chat said. Shooting Cthulhu in the face with a laser gun is pretty standard for the Void Engineers. Where a mage for any or other organization would be like, what the fuck? Oh god, Cthulhu? Yeah, that actually might make sense. Except for the progenitors, who might actually just make their own Cthulhu, for all I know, and probably have.
To a cool tidbit, actually, the Void Engineers have, like, therapists on staff,
what?
psychologists.
Really?
They give people actual sort of psychotherapy, slots of which are popular with members of all kinds of conventions, because I'm talking actual real therapy, not like social processing, attunement, magical brainwashing. Real, honest to God, let's actually talk about your issues
Work
and
through
help
the
you
feelings.
deal with the stuff that you've experienced type psychotherapy. When it comes to foci, a Void Engineer focus is rarely going to be subtle and will usually involve all kinds of hyper-technology and weird alien shit. But
I'm honestly surprised it wouldn't just be a communicator off Star Trek. Other than the fact that would definitely not be legally distinct enough for them to ever get away with that, even at this remove. It's not owned by Disney yet, but there's always the chance of it. You want to avoid that happening.
It doesn't really matter if it's vulgar, because unless you're talking about a very specific subset of agents that operates surgically on the front lines to get rid of stuff that slipped the net, they're way beyond the bounds of consensus anyway.
Which is why they probably want to ignore it.
Every kind of technology that they can dream up, especially of the strange hypertech variety. Spaceships, sensors, satellites, weird astronomical models, and sort of high-end holographic orreries. There's a lot more freedom too in the kinds of
you go full on Robotech with this.
Models that you get to subscribe to than you might expect, and a lot of room for experimentation with all the weird shit that exists out there. If you find this strange mineral that cannot be found on Earth somewhere out there, and you really believe that using it to fuel your spaceship will make your spaceship go faster than light, your spaceship will go faster than light. Some of the rather more conventional foci include education and training, by which I mean like the belief that you have learned this protocol, you have learned how to deal with this situation, and thus you can make the magic happen that is required to deal with the situation. Spacesuits, of course, and all their fancy gimmicks, all other types of cool astronaut fashion. Yes, I am indeed naked underneath this. And let's not discount the good old sailor superstitions. Management may not like it, but the fact remains that if you adhere to certain rules and protocols and perform certain seemingly meaningless rituals before departure, your voyage will be blessed with good luck.
Void engineers sailing the sea of space. Yeah, that makes sense. And if there's one thing I found out about management in World of Darkness from this entire video, it's that what management doesn't know really doesn't change ever, no matter what. You lie to them because they don't understand the concept of not being told what they want. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of them who think that the 100 Years' War never happened. England is currently in control of the world, and there is no America.
Void Engineer methodologies include the Border Corps Division, which maintains outposts just on the other side of the gauntlet of our reality to monitor for potential incursions.
So they're lying, essentially?
Fight them before they can cross over at all. Sometimes that means just buying the rest of the technocracy a few more minutes to prepare. Frontier Division, which focuses on unlocking...
See, that sounds like an amazing story right there. Like being on the front line to buy minutes for other people to do something. That sounds like the crazy endgame style story of we're going to buy minutes with like that band of rebels to hold out until you finally get a bunch of people to come together to fight an alien threat. It's so cool. Why is this not bigger? Because this is deep lore for a deep lore setting that is not even the main most famous one of the setting, which is still Vampire the Masquerade, I think.
The secrets of the various unexplored areas of Earth, and the pan-dimensional core that has all the spaceships with which they go to far-off distant galaxies. And, not to cut this unnecessarily short or anything, that's it. That is the technocracy. Obviously, there's still a fuck-ton left of discuss.
Like what?
But with all of my World of Darkness lore videos, the point is really to help you get a sense of the basics.
2 hours, 8 minutes, and 29 seconds. Is the basics. What counts as a deep dive?
So you can understand all the details as you go do your own exploration of this immense setting. And always remember, much of the stuff you'll read is not set in stone, so if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities. You know what? Fuck it. Spam them. Don't actually spam them. Don't do it.
Spam them. Do the spam.
Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribe Star, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. Maybe soon I'll get to say buy my novel too. Who knows? And in that spirit, I wear this outfit just for the recording. Just so you know, when I wear an outfit, you know I record over several days. I'm not wearing the same outfit over several days.
A common lie.
I'm just putting it on for the recording.
Okay, so yeah, these are the bad guys. And for the Syndicate, oh no, they're unironically the bad guys. But also, I kind of love this because even some of the others who are a little more on the gray side, and by gray, I mean, they're basically the bad guys, but there's just enough cool that they're or immoral enough that you can't tell they're the bad guys. This is so cool. This is wanting, or I want to play Mage just to deal with this level of, okay, the dimensional anomalies going on. We have no idea what's going on. We need to fight through it. We need to make allies with places we don't normally get around to it. So you pull up the ragtag bunch of people from all the settings to deal with the crazy shit. I mean, I'm talking going full on Commander Shepard in Mass Effect 2 in this situation, man. This seems like the dimensional anomaly is the best thing to basically play Mass Effect 2 with mages and werewolves and vampires and maybe a wraith in there because sure, why not? In lore, it was started by people doing that shit, and we could have nukes everywhere because that's what started. Why not go further and say, oh, and now we're being invaded by an alien race that's taking advantage of it? Call them the gatherers who like to gather things. I'm just saying, man, it's right there. God, I want to do this game. And I know for a fact I would never have the time to DM that. And someone else would not be as crazy as me to think of this dumb thing right away. And also be willing to DM it because that time would be so crazy. It sounds so stupid. But as long as you're playing Rule of Cool, anything works. Or you have a DM like Airier who runs on the premise of, I'm going to absolutely break this system for my characters. And I need to balance based on that level. When you have an 8-player game that takes an hour to run one round, and yet somehow the DM makes their own player character given all the OP weapons because you're going to die to the temporary intro boss, not even the final one. Yeah. I'm looking at you. Final intro boss that had a 20 levels of sorcerer, 20 levels of wizard, was an elder ancient dragon, void force dragon, could turn invisible, and had a clone and a simulacrum at the same time. That was supposed to be a short fight, and it took 9 hours for the first phase. I'm not scarred mentally from that at all. No. Yeah. There's a VOD of it if you want to check it out. Runaway Screaming, though. So basically what I'm saying is, this is so freaking cool, man. And I'm probably going to try and look up some of the source books just to read more into it because it sounds like fun. Either way, you guys know the deal. There'll be a link below with the original video. Hit it up. I'll see you in the next one.